Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Kicks and Picks podcast. It's your host, Scott, today. Nick is unfortunately absent due to some plane travel difficulties, so you'll be dealing with me. But luckily, we have a very special guest. We have Nima Tavallaey Roodsari from Sempre Inter and the Italian Football Podcast. He is obviously an expert in all things Inter Milan, so we will be diving deep into the club as part of our summer series, State of the Club. Nima, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining. How are you doing?
Oh, it's good to be with you guys. I'm doing well. How are you? Hope you're all doing well.
Yeah, we're doing all right. I mean, we are in the thick of the summer, which means there's lots of things going on, typically off the field, but doesn't mean there's any shortage of things to discuss. Obviously, Inter had a pretty solid season, so maybe we can take a peek at the year in review. Just a quick recap: made it to the Champions League finals this season, although did come away with maybe a slightly disappointing 1-0 loss to Manchester City. Nothing really to be ashamed about. City been a top club for many seasons. Inter Coppa Italia champions, so they do get some trophy, or they do get some silverware this season, and finished third in Serie A, 72 points. Nick wanted to call out, especially that's 2 points behind Lazio. I'll let him get that shout out in, even though he's not on the podcast today, because I don't know when that will happen again. So what were your thoughts on the season as a whole? Would you kind of mark that as a successful season, or do you think there was more in progress and there's more to come maybe in the next couple of months?
It was a very weird season and it was a very difficult season. It reminded me in many ways of 93, 94 when Inter almost got relegated and ended up winning the UEFA Cup in the middle of that. It was a very strange season, and it kind of all started. Inter's problems started in the summer when they were going to buy Bremer, but they completely cocked that up. And then that had a ripple effect, just because Simone Inzaghi had prepared to play a certain way with Bremen, and that never happened. And then the Milan Skriniar they were counting on selling, and he didn't extend his contract and ended up leaving, and the whole thing dragged out. It was everything tactically on and off the pitch it was an earthquake. The way they lost Dybala, the way they lost Bremer, because they were dragging their feet. That kind of caused chaos at the club. And for Inzaghi in his preparation. And I think after that, he was pretty much playing catch up for the rest of the season in the league. That coupled with injuries to key players like Brozovic and Lukaku, who were injured for most of the season. And Lukaku, obviously, when he wasn't injured, needs time to get going. And he was woefully awful for large parts until he got going. Brozovic was good when he was playing. So it was a very, very difficult, unbalanced season. And you saw, I mean, Inter still created lots of chances. They have an identity. They were a team that knew how they play, how they wanted to play, and they had a clear identity. They just couldn't kill off games, and they lost many, many games because of that. 12 defeats in the league is way, way too many. But they still managed to finish third. They successfully defended their titles in the Supercoppa and the Coppa Italia. And then, of course, the Champions League, the finals, six-time Inter in the final, which is truly, truly remarkable. And, that's historic in and of itself. So it was a weird season. It was a difficult season, but it ended, despite the defeat against City, it ended on a positive note, in the sense that everyone was united. The club was united. The ownership, the manager, the directors, the players, they all kind of came together, and everyone is on the same page. And that's why when you see these departures in the summer, there's not you can tell that everyone is united. They've agreed on this strategy and they know what they want to do. But no, last year was very, very difficult. It's very difficult to give an overall mark, but at the end of the day, I mean, in the league, it was not good enough. Absolutely not. 12 defeats is way too much. Third spot is okay, but 12 defeats is not good enough. They won the Coppa Italia, they won the Supercoppa. That you can't do better than that. And they got to the final of the Champions League, which kind of saves the season. It really, really makes this a season to remember in many, many ways because of that. And also, of course, beating Milan, the Euro derby. I mean, that's only happened twice before. The Euro derby, taking revenge on Milan in the Euro derby for the previous two losses in the Euro derbies in the Champions League. That is very important. Beating Milan 4 games in a row in 3 different competitions. Coppa Italia, Supercoppa, Serie A, and another four competitions even, Champions League. That was very important.
Yeah, those are usually the little silver linings that you can kind of take out of these mixed bag seasons sometimes. If you have those wins, those results over the local rivals. I'm going to point out, I think I'm glad you brought this up, that, the season
Sorry, they
kind of
didn't
got
play
off.
Milan in the Coppa Italia. I got confused there. It was a Serie A, Champions League, and Supercoppa,
Yeah,
so 3 competitions.
the semis. Yeah, yeah. But I'm glad you brought up that the summer kind of last season kind of set Inter up on a rocky foundation with some of the dealings that they expected to happen not occurring, giving Inzaghi a little bit of confusion maybe on how he was going to set up to start the season. The results kind of showed they picked up, I think, 5 of their losses were pretty early on in the first 2 or 3 months of the season, and then they
Yeah.
kind of got it together. So I think it kind of calls attention to why, although we say you're not going to necessarily win the league or win a trophy in the summer, it does have an impact, and it can kind of set you back in some of your goals, especially if you have lofty goals like a club would Inter would have. But I think they have a pretty similar story to how a lot of Liverpool seasons. Sorry, I should mention I'm a Liverpool fan, where they kind of started out, had a little bit of a rocky start, then they get things going. They seem to do well coming back from the World Cup break. I think some clubs faltered a little bit, having that time off in the middle of the season. That's a little bit different. But they did have that swoon in February and March where the momentum that they had coming in off of the World Cup kind of fell apart. They had bad results to, I think it was Spezia and
Well,
Bologna
those games against Spezia and Fiorentina,
and
especially, they
Fiorentina. Yeah.
dominated those games completely and should have won 4-5-1, but they couldn't put the ball into the back of the net. You had missed penalties. I mean, it was really, this is what I mean, that Inter strikers really let them down. And I include Lukaku and Lautaro in that. But what happened is that, and it kind of exposed the lack of quality and depth in important areas. But it was so that was open for everyone to see, but at the same time they all hit form. I mean, when Inzaghi ruthlessly told the team from April 1st, I'm rotating, and he did 5-6 changes every single week because he was playing 9 games in April, 8 games in May.
Mm-hmm.
So he rotated ruthlessly and decided to play with a somewhat lower block, and not counter-attacking per se, because Inter are a very progressive side in terms of ball retention and ball carrying and passing. I mean, they pass. They have some of the highest completed passes and the highest both in number and percentage in all of Europe last season. So it's not a defensive side, but they decided that they were going to treat every single game like a cup final, and this team responded to that, and that's when the results started changing in April and
Yeah.
May. So I think that's what we're going to see this coming season as well. You're going to see Inzaghi rotate heavily. He wants to have 22, 23 players of equal quality, and he's going to rotate a lot between them. So I think that's where they're going. Essentially, it's today they had the first season, season kickoff, and they said openly, we want to win the Serie A. That is the goal. They usually don't say stuff like that. They usually don't make statements like that. But this today was crystal clear. We want the second star. Our objective is to win the Serie A. And we expect to have a competitive team to be able to do that. We have a responsibility, Marotta said, as a team that came second in the Champions League and so on. So they are kind of building on that, but they're also rejuvenating. I mean, Edin Dzeko out, Marcus Thuram in, Handanovic is left, Danilo D'Ambrosio's left, Roberto Gagliardini's left, Dalbert, all of these players that have been, somewhat fringe and older, they've all left. Milan Skriniar left on a free transfer because of that, but things like that, and they've managed to extend Çalhanoğlu, Bastoni. They wanted to keep De Vrij. Now they're looking at cashing in on Onana. They are basically rebuilding. The rebuilding phase is coming in, and also they want to lower the wage bill from 134 to 137 million euros a year gross to somewhere around 120. That's where they want to be. So it's clear that they are going, that they want to win the domestic treble and to reach at least around the last 16 in the Champions League next season. That is the obvious, that's what comes across from them. But now we're only halfway through the mercato, and it was at this point last summer, that everything fell apart. The wheels came off with Dybala and Bremer, those 24 hours, 48 hours that Inter never really recovered from. So, you got to keep your eye on the ball. And I think the club knows that now.
So with this rejuvenation of the squad and some of the French players getting kind of moved on, looking back at last season, who were some of the standout players for you? Maybe players that stepped it up, had breakthrough seasons, or carried a larger load than maybe what would have been expected.
I think Hakan Çalhanoğlu playing as a deep lying playmaker is the first name that comes to mind, because it was a move that came out of necessity, and it turned out to be absolutely fantastic because he was world class in that position. Inter barely missed Marcelo Brozovic. I think we know that the reason why they sold Brozovic was not just because of his age and his high wages, but also because Çalhanoğlu was so good in that position, and it allowed Inter to play much more direct and play deeper. As Brozovic is much more patient in the build-up than when Çalhanoğlu was there. So that's to me, Çalhanoğlu as a deep lying playmaker was definitely one of the surprises of the season. But Andre Onana as well. I mean, him coming there on a free transfer and his ability. I mean, people talk about a goalkeeper that's good with his feet. I think that's somewhat misleading. Being good with your feet is now every goalkeeper has to be good with his feet. What Onana is essentially allows you to play with 11 outfield players, in the sense that his passing vision and creativity is on par with some of the best midfielders in the world. I mean, the passes that he makes, that some of the goals Inter scored, they were able to beat 3 lines of players because their goalkeeper had the vision and passing of Andrea Pirlo in from the back. I mean, when even when they didn't build up slowly from the back, Onana, when they did, he could play these incredible passes. Also, in the build-up phase, he became a right centre back, so you need to play with a 4-5-2 essentially, and that gave them a numerical advantage, and it also made them almost impossible to press, as Pep Guardiola noted in his post-match comments. Said, "Look, we didn't even bother to press high up because we knew we would be walking right into their trap, and we didn't want to do that." So, he was probably the breakout player of the season. Acerbi, no one expected him to be this good. I expected him to be good, but I didn't expect him to be fantastic, which he was. And Darmian as a right centre back. Nicolo Barella wasn't consistent, but he had the best season he's ever had in terms, there's no doubt about that. And also, I think Lautaro Martinez continued to take strides, as did Federico Di Marco.
Yeah, I was going to ask about Lautaro because I know you mentioned the strikers had disappointing spells during the middle of the season, maybe let down the team in certain games, but I think he did a pretty good job in terms of at least carrying that torch offensively for Inter throughout some of these, dry periods, if you want to call them that. And given that he was working with, Lukaku, who was injured, and Dzeko, obviously, where he was at in his career, do you think he was able to do enough in that position, or do you think there's still more for him to kind of develop and provide for Inter?
It depends on what your expectations of Lautaro Martinez are. I've never looked at him as a 9. I look at him as a 9.5, 10, seconda punta kind of thing. And I think as a seconda punta, he's outstanding. I don't. He's too much of a patchy player, and he's too much of he's not a killer in the box to be a number 9. Maybe that can change. Maybe he can develop into that. But at this moment in his career, I think he's more of a 9.5 and a link and he's a fantastic 9.5. He's a brilliant link-up player. He's technical. His football IQ is through the roof. But the killer instinct just isn't there consistently. He's too patchy, and he shouldn't be left anywhere near a penalty kick, as he's shown. So that's where I think he was. If that's what your expectation is of him, then you'll be disappointed. But I don't have that expectation of him. The expectation I have of him is being the 9.5. But of course, at some point, they have to decide, what is he? Is he the 10, 9.5, or is he a 9? And if he's a 9, well, can he carry that burden? I'm not. I'm a little bit still on the fence there. I think the signing of Marcus Thuram and they wanting to bring back Romelu Lukaku shows that they want to spread the goals around, and that they don't see him as a capocannoniere, goal scorer. That's not what they see him as, and I think that's the right decision.
Yeah, I think he's always played better, when he's had somebody to pair with, and during Lukaku's better seasons, they've obviously both looked really well. So, it'll be interesting to see how things play out this season. Obviously, Lukaku's still, unsure if he's returning or not, and we can kind of broach that subject a little bit more. But I think before we get into some of the summer dealings, maybe we can just get a final assessment from you on Inzaghi. I know you made the adjustment in the end of the season. You talked about how that started to pay off dividends, but do you think there was more that he could have done in the previous season, or do you think, or were you satisfied with how he kind of set up the club overall?
I think Simone Inzaghi's problem has never been tactical. I think he's grown as a coach. His issue has been he's a young coach still. He's only 47, 48 years old, and he was at Lazio for 5.5 years, and this was his real first big challenge away from a club that he's been at for 12 to 19 years, somewhere there. I think Inzaghi's problem was at Inter was that he needed to grow with a job. Meaning his read of the game needed to improve. It did throughout the season. His substitutions that were much maligned, you were once again not good enough, but he learned through the season. But more importantly, his leadership, in the sense that he needs to be more assertive in his leadership. He's won the team over now, in the sense because he's a very modern manager. He doesn't do the whole management by fear, drill sergeant, a la Antonio Conte, Mourinho kind of thing. No, he's more a leader, a player's coach, in the sense that it's more like management by consent. He wins them over in the sense that we're all professionals here. We're at Inter. We need to show pride. We're here to win. And he wins them over intellectually, and they're all behind him now. You can see that. Bastoni, all these players talk about how much they love him and how much they respect him and they love playing his football. And you can understand that because they do play very good football. It's not a defensive, outdated football. It's a possession-based game. They just have a lower defensive balance. But so I think he's developed, and he's a young coach, and he needed time to grow and develop. But now it's crunch time, and I think he knows it. This year is the year coming. He has to win the Serie A. He has to. I can't say maybe win the Serie A, but now that he's come out and said that our goal is to win the Serie A, they have to be and challenge until the end. They can't be 5-10 points off the pace come May. That is not good enough. He will have to win the Champions League if he wants to stay at Inter then. If that's the goal. But I think it's clear they want to win. He wants to win the Serie A, and they want to win the Serie A, and that is the objective. But again, I don't like to make predictions in mid-July. The squads are far from being even half decided at this point. Juventus have barely made a move. Milan are starting to make a move. Napoli haven't done anything. Roma have done a few things. Lazio are kind of starting to do things with Milinkovic-Savic doing. We're going to see more from them. Lots of teams haven't even begun movement, so it's too premature to even talk about what will happen next season.
Yeah, definitely still plenty to come, and maybe we can kind of start talking about some of these moves that are starting to appear now, some of the ones that are rumored, but maybe we can discuss with the ones that have actually occurred. So Frattesi has come in helping out the midfield. You mentioned Thuram, he's on board now as well. How do you see these two players that are confirmed joining the club for the next season fitting in, and what sort of roles do you see them playing in the next season?
Well, Marcus Thuram is a player I wanted 2 years ago. He was going to join Inter before that injury on the last weekend before the mercato closed, and they had to go after Joaquin Correa instead. So that's a player I wanted to see at Inter for a long time. He has pace, he has dribbling qualities, he's much more direct. And I know that people say that, his numbers don't say he's a goal scorer, but I actually think at Inter he will score lots of goals. I really think that. And I think he'll link up really well with Lautaro Martinez. And I think all four of them will link up together really well. So I'm very happy with that signing. Davide Frattesi is a player who will offer. He's a very dynamic player. He's brought in to score goals from midfield and offer that run from deep, but he's also a good ball carrier, and he might not dribble million players, but he has good technique. He's got a good shot on him. His timing is excellent. He's pretty much, the people kind of always likened him to a poor man's Barella, and I think to a certain extent I would say that would be accurate, but I think he's too good of a player in his own right to be likened to that, because Barella's more of a tuttocampista. He can play in every single role in midfield. Fratesi is a mezzala in a three-man midfield. Whether it's a 3-5-2 or 4-3-3 is different, but he is a mezzala in a box-to-box midfielder in a three-man midfield. And I think that's where he's going to be being brought in. And I think he will do really, really well. He's good at winning the ball, and he's good at, when winning the ball, also driving the ball and linking up and passing. So I know he's going to fit into Inzaghi's system really well.
So you see him more as a complementary player to Barella than maybe like
No,
a
I see them
potential.
both together. No, I see them together. I see Inzaghi wanting to have six midfielders, two for every role, or in this case, four. I mean, he
Mhm.
even said today that Barella can play on the left, he can play on the right. Fratesi can play on the left, he can play on the right. So he's going to mix it up. He's already had Mkhitaryan, who's played in both, mainly to the left of the three-man midfield. Çalhanoğlu has played on the right and the left, but he's mainly going to play in the deep lying role. He's got Christian Aslani, who's going to play in the deep lying role. They're going to bring in another midfielder as well. So no, he wants versatility, and he wants options and choices, which is what made Inter tick towards the end of last season. Which is why I say that I think we're going to see an Inter that rotates from day one.
Yeah, and I think as you look around at what they need to make that kind of dream of being able to rotate 22 strong players throughout, there's still going to be more coming in. Some names that are rumored, obviously Lukaku, that's a consistent saga. I think the price that Inter are maybe hoping for is a little bit lower than what Chelsea are trying to get.
Mm.
Where do you see this saga ending? Do you think Lukaku comes back to Inter for another season,
I,
or if there's
I, I
another?
think I think he does come back to Inter. I think this saga ends on Lukaku and Inter's terms. As much as Chelsea try to fight back, I think they have to understand the will of the player is decisive. And he's showed that he's willing to give up money and make this work. So I think Chelsea were just going to have to, understand. Otherwise, they're going to have to deal with a player who is out of their project and going to sit on the bench and cost them a shitload of money, if you pardon my French. And they can't really afford to have that. They can't afford to have him sit there and not play and not care. They just can't afford to do that. So I think what's going to happen is they're going to be it's going to be a loan with an option that becomes an obligation if Inter qualify for the Champions League, not this season but the next season after that, somewhere around a deal worth 35 million euros. That's where I think this is going to land, because it's not unreasonable. It's not unreasonable. It's not an unreasonable offer for a player of Lukaku's history and characteristics at this point in his career.
Do you take any of the rumors about Lukaku potentially being looked at from some of the Saudi Arabia clubs as a
No, we know it's
potential?
true, but he said he's not interested. I mean, that's been, his lawyer came out and said, yeah, we've had offers from others, but we're not interested. He doesn't want to go there.
So he's truly a player with his heart set on Inter, and you think
He's
that's ultimately
decided
what
that,
pushes
yeah.
it
I mean,
through.
he's bullying through that deal, and I think Chelsea were just going to have to bite the bullet there.
Elsewhere, I think there's also some potential wing backs that are being looked at. I know Emil Holm from Spezia is
Mm.
one option, and then there's a new player from Feyenoord. I think it's Marcus
Pedersen.
Holmgren Pearson. Yep. Um, which of these is there one that you
No.
think is the ideal target here, or is Inter happy
Well,
with
neither of them.
whichever
Neither
one?
of them are. I don't really buy those. Look, I look at this. Inter's problems are they have to resolve in order. Goalkeeping situation, because Onana sold, they need two. Today, Handanovic left the club. They said goodbye to him officially and to Cordas. So Onana's the only club at the contract. They're bringing Di Gennaro in, and they're probably going to bring in. They need to bring two more in. Jan Sommer and Trubin are the ones being rumored if Onana, leaves, and there's other names being floated. So three goalkeepers need to be resolved. Then, secondly, right centre back. You need to have a starter that replaces Milan Skriniar. Um, and then the Lukaku situation, and then finally a midfielder and right wing backup, because Denzel Dumfries there's no interest in him, and so he's going to start. Inter have Darmian in the squad already,
Mm-hmm.
so they've also brought in Jan Bisek, who can play on the to the right and left in a back three, a young German under-21 defender who they really believe in. They bought him from Aarhus in Denmark. So I think Lukaku goalkeeper, then right centre back, and then go into August and fix the sixth midfielder and the backup right wing back.
So those are the ones that maybe they can wait towards the end of the season, but give,
No, the end of the summer for sure. I mean,
or yeah,
the
excuse
right
me, end
centre
of the
back.
summer,
Yeah,
end
no,
of
no,
the
no.
off
The
season.
right, the right centre back and the secondary, the striker, goalkeeper, and right centre back. Those are starting. Those are players that you need to fix that as soon as possible.
So who are some of the players for that right center back position that Inter are looking at? Are there any standouts that make the most sense, or is it kind
Well, I
of
mean, it's been players. Lots of players have been rumored. We know Matteo Darmian did really well there, and he's getting a bit older, so they might want to continue that. But at the same time, Milan Skriniar was a starting player, so they need to bring in a starting level quality player as well. And so Pavard has been linked for a long time.
Mhm.
Demiral has been linked, although I think all that entire, all these links have cooled off. And then of course you have you've got this Emil Holm stuff, which I can't imagine they're bringing in him to be a kind of backup to Dumfries, because he's not a wing back. He's he's just not good enough, technically and tactically. I'm from Gothenburg. I've watched Emil Holm play for my home team for years. Emil Holm is a decent player, but he is nowhere the level of playing for an Inter or Milan or Juve. He isn't today. Maybe he will be one day. He certainly isn't today, and he's very, very young. So for me, not buying Raul Bellanova was a huge mistake, which I think Inter are going to regret miserably, because he's not far off of becoming, I think, a starting, competing seriously for a starting position for the Italian national team. I think Inter are going to regret this badly, and I understand that 7 million was a bit much for them, but I think they might end up ruining the day they let him go. To be honest.
Yeah, and so maybe we can kind of touch upon that now. So obviously, there's lots of ambitions and players to sign this summer. Like a lot of clubs in Serie A, there's always some behind the scenes situations that kind of have to get taken care of. The good news for Inter is they do have a new kit sponsor with Paramount Plus. They just renewed the kit sponsor with Nike.
Like,
How's everything going on with the club? I know there's still some debt that needs to be cleared up, some loans that I think come due next summer that there's
yeah,
concerns
we need to
about.
talk about that, because people don't quite understand that, and there's been a lot of nonsense about that. And let me just be absolutely clear: the Oak Tree loan is not a loan that Inter owe to Oak Tree. No, Suning, the owners, took out a loan from Oak Tree using their ownership of Inter as collateral, and that loan that they took from Oak Tree is to secure Inter's future, meaning whenever Inter need a cash injection, that's where the money comes from Oak Tree. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so Inter don't owe a penny to Oak Tree, and Suning are by law not allowed to take money out of Inter to pay back Oak Tree. That's just not allowed. It's one thing if Inter turn a profit and pay out dividends, which Suning then used to pay off that loan, but we're not there yet. Inter don't turn a profit, and not very many Italian football clubs turn a profit. So that's just not, that has to be just, that's how it is. Inter's debt, they have a bond that matures in a couple of years for 300 million, and they have an operating debt of 300 million as well. So the most important thing when Suning took out that loan was to lower the costs, and they have. The last 2 years they've turned a almost 180-90 million euro profit from the transfer market. They've lowered the wage bill significantly, and they are, so they're in a much better financial position than they've ever been in. Well, before Suning, just in the beginning, since Suning took over. Suning did a really good job in the beginning, and there's been problems, of course, with the Chinese economy. It's slowly recovering, so now sponsorships could return to China from China again, because they were at one point almost 100 million euros a year in sponsorship deals from China. Now it's down to 3. So that's also been a problem. The Chinese economy is recovering, and of course, Suning being a Chinese company or a mega company, their main contacts lay there. Now, the kit sponsor thing with Digital Bits was an embarrassment run
Mm-hmm.
by the CEO, the corporate CEO Antonello, and the chief financial officer Luca Danovaro. They screwed that up royally. Someone has to answer for that.
Hmm.
with the Digital Bits, because it seems like they got, based on what Digital Bits CEO said when he came out, he basically, basically said that, well, he didn't say it in so many words, but if you understand the law, you'll understand that essentially Inter fell for the easiest bait and switch rule in the book. They didn't read their contracts and who they actually signed a contract with. That's what Digital Bits say. If that is true, then Inter got suckered in the easiest way ever, and whoever took the final decision and gave the final okay to that, heads have to roll because it's incredibly embarrassing. But that's in the past, and that's now up to litigation, and the lawyers are involved. What we have now is a €30 million hit sponsorship deal with Nike per year, 15-20 million from Paramount Plus, other deals as well with Leo Vegas and other companies for the training kit. They're looking for a further partner at the back. The aim is to bring in somewhere around 60-70 million euros from sponsorships of the kit alone per year.
Hmm.
They're looking to hit that target. They're looking also, if the Chinese economy continues to recover and these things, then they're looking to bring back sponsorships and all the deals they signed with them, with the Chinese companies, and bring that up to somewhere around 90-100 million euros as well. So they are recovering, and also, Inter have the highest average transfer, highest average attendance in the Serie A, together with Milan. They're number one and Milan number two, not much separate them. So so they're looking to build a new project. They average something like 72,000 each game, which is a sold out capacity crowd. So they make a lot of money. I mean, Inter set new records for gate receipts, just 9.5, 10, almost 10 million, or over 10 million for one game, the return leg against Milan in the Champions League. Just 10 million euros in gate receipts from that game. So they are growing, and the new stadium is a serious project, they claim, and they keep banging on that drum. They just need to actually act on it. But things are looking better. Yes, they are.
So you would say that the finances of Inter are perhaps better than what maybe some places are insinuating, and that shouldn't be a blocker for any of their ambition, especially going into the next season.
No, not at all. Inter's finances have been, they've been very open about it, and I think maybe that's been the wrong strategy, because a lot of people have used that and run with it and created agendas, whilst we have, clubs like Juve, who, I mean, they committed felonies and crimes, and were thrown out and of Europe, and were given penalty deductions, obviously for the wrong. They should have been given 20 points, 30 points for what they did with the so-called salary maneuver, whilst the plusvalenza capital gains thing was blown out of proportion a little bit, in my opinion. And but I mean, I think that that was a deliberate strategy as well. But it is what it is. But if we're, Inter have turned a loss, but they have kind of turned a corner, and now they're actually in a good spot.
Yeah, so I think maybe that's our springboard into kind of the final piece of this podcast, which is, let's try to look and see what the expectations are for the upcoming season. So we always caveat this is currently middle of July. There are 10, 12 different things that could happen anytime between now and the start of season that could, significantly impact how we feel going into the season. But as things stand now, what do you think are the expectations for the club, or maybe even from yourself, for what Inter should be achieving coming into the 2023-2024 season?
Look, it depends on how the mercato ends. It depends on if Onana is sold and how he's replaced by and all that jazz. And who is the right centre back who's going to start. Lukaku. All of these pieces have to fall into place before we can really say that. But look, I'm just going to go revert back to what Inzaghi and Marotta said themselves. They said, our goal is to win the second star. I think Inter's goal is to win the second star, meaning the 20th league title and the 10th Coppa Italia, which would give them a gold star and a silver star in Italian football, and to win the Supercoppa, because that actually brings you quite a bit of money. So I think it's clear they're going for a domestic treble. And they are also, I think they've budgeted for a round of 16 in the Champions League, and anything above that is just bonus. I think that's what they're going for. I don't think they are remotely even planning for winning the Champions League or going far in the Champions League, and I don't think they can. I think without Onana or a goalkeeper who can beat the press because of how good he is with his feet. I think unless Jan Sommer turns out or Trubin turns out to be that good and can cover for that, they're going to be weakened in that position. I think in Europe that's decisive. I think that is the main reason why Inter got to the final. And also, of course, you need to be a bit lucky with the draw, but we'll see. We'll see where Inter go. But I think, yeah, no, domestically, I think they're going for all three titles.
Yeah, I think it's kind of shared too by some of the outside perceptions. Currently in the gambling and book market, Inter are the favorite to win the Scudetto next season. They're sitting there at plus 200. Do you buy that this early in the season? Do you think that they are the clear favorite of all the clubs in Italy right now to come away with a Scudetto? And
I don't know. I wouldn't say they were clear favorites, but I do understand why the bookies have them there, because there's a lot of I mean, if you look at the others, there is a lot of uncertainty. I mean, Napoli have lost their coach and the best central defender in the world, if you ask me, based on last season, Kim Min-jae. Rudy Garcia is not a serial winner. Rudy Garcia is a very strange choice. Their sporting director left. Of course, Victor Osimhen is still there. Khvicha Kvaratskhelia is still there. Even we're recording this on 12th of July. Who knows what happens there? But unless somebody comes in with something stupid, they look like they're going to stay. And Napoli maybe even sell Zielinski and bring in someone youth. So they're rejuvenating. And whenever you do that, it takes time for the young players to get to hit the ground running. So there are question marks there. Then you look at Milan, who have been one. It's been a lot of drama there. Ricky Massara and Paolo Maldini being sacked on the spot the way that they were. Selling Sandro Tonali, bringing in these other players from the Premier League, that's going to take some time to adapt, and you can see why they're bringing them in. But again, they're changing how they're playing, and that also is going to take some time. Juve, they're going to play with a 3-5-2, but they have to end the season and the summer on a profit of 140 million euros. Who goes, who stays, who comes in? They're also going for a youth project. They've also got a new sporting and management coming in, with Allegri obviously staying. There's lots of question marks. I think the Serie A, what makes it the most exciting league is the fact that you don't have a clear favorite. Inter as well. I mean, yes, Inter have done things, but you also have to remember Inter have lost Samir Handanovic, who was a captain, Edin Dzeko, the captain of the Bosnian national team, a leader, Marcelo Brozovic, deputy captain, gone. Danilo D'Ambrosio, been there for a decade, leader in the dressing room, gone. These leaders when four important leaders leave, and also Andre Onana is a leader as well. If he leaves, it leaves a vacuum. Who's going to take up the fallen mantle of these guys and be the leader in the dressing room? And Milan Skriniar, another one who was touted to be the captain, he's also left. So there's 4 or 5 really important dressing room characters and starting characters who've all left. So there's lots of question marks. But yeah, I do think that at this point you can say Inter are perhaps today the ones that are in best position to win it. But I wouldn't discount Lazio even, or Roma. I mean, if with anything we learned from Napoli is that if you actually hit every single transfer signing and you create that environment, you can actually have a magical season and go on and win the Serie A, So it's I think that's the Serie A, the Scudetto is very much up in the air. I think Milan, Inter, Napoli, and Juve all have a good chance of winning it. But of course, I think at this point, Inter are in the best position to win it. Yes.
Yeah, it definitely seems, even though it is this early, that there's a lot of things going in Inter's direction that kind of points to that. And that's probably where the books are setting the odds accordingly. But as you mentioned, one of the reasons why we love Serie A so much is it also has that, anybody can come from anywhere and put together a strong season if they have the right pieces.
Yeah, I mean, look at Roma. I think Roma, look, if Roma manage to get Scamacca and they manage to keep Dybala and they continue, and if they can even get Kamada on a free transfer and continue doing what they're doing, I think Mourinho's got something really interesting going on there.
Yeah.
And the same thing with Lazio and Sarri. I mean, Sarri, he finished second for Christ's sakes last season. That is an unbelievable achievement. And now they've got 40 million coming in from Milinkovic-Savic. He wants Zielinski. I mean, we know that he loves Zielinski. Even, he compared him to Kevin De Bruyne. I mean, that's how much he rates Zielinski. So if they can bring in Zielinski, if they can bring in, if they're going to sell Marusic as well, and they can strengthen, their defense and also maybe bring in a striker as well. I mean, who knows how well they can do Lazio?
Yeah, let's take a look now at the Champions League competition. I know you mentioned they had budgeted for an appearance, hopefully in the final 16. I'm going to one up that. I'm going to say I think Inter can get themselves back to the quarterfinals with a good
Yeah.
draw, of course. Do you agree with that? Do you think that's a likely goal for them in Europe, or do you
I
think that
think
maybe they had a better run this season than can maybe be repeated next season?
I don't think they'll get to the final. I think if Inter win their group, they should get a good draw and get to the quarterfinal. And from then on, it's injuries, form. One thing that Inter have speaking in favor of them is, well, they now have experience of having gone to the final. They know what it takes in Europe. And this is also a team that played in the final of the Europa League a couple of seasons ago as well. So this is a team with experience. They have players who have won the Serie A, who have won the European Champions, who won Coppa America, won the World Cup, won the Coppa Italia. They have winners in the squad. The core of the squad are experienced winners who've played finals, won finals, lost finals. So they know what it takes. And I think that can't be underestimated. That can't be overestimated in this situation. So
Yeah,
or both underestimated and overestimated. You really can't do that. These are really important qualities, and they've got players hitting their kind of ideal form as well. They rejuvenated, but they haven't rejuvenated to like 19-year-olds. They've rejuvenated to 27, 24, 25, 26. That's a good age. And
yeah.
they have a coach who's now in his third season at the club. He's got his confidence. I think we're in a good spot.
Yeah, the challenge to me in Champions League for Inter is I think that's probably the competition where you would see the impact in the loss of leadership that you mentioned the most, right? Like Inzaghi should be able to kind of, get around that over the course of 30 plus matches in the league. But in a competition that's, has so few games, that's knockout, once you get past the group stage, that's really we need to have the leaders on the pitch, because if something's going wrong in like the first 30 minutes, it's hard for the manager to really have a sound effect on that match like you could have if you have some of those leaders that are, out there and playing the game.
Yeah. No, look, I think it's more tactical. I think Onana, tactically, because of the way that he plays, because of how important with him, Inter had 11 outfield players and were able to play a 4-5-2. He became the right centre back. The right centre back became a full back. The middle centre back became a left centre back, became a left centre back, and the left centre back became the full back. The wing backs became wingers. That in and of itself allowed Inter to play in a way that not many teams could deal with. Manchester City couldn't get anywhere near Inter. And that's Manchester City.
Yeah.
And essentially they on the preponderance of play, I'd say Inter had the better chances. And City didn't really create much other than the goal and one chance in the first half. Or no, with Phil Foden, of course, in the first half. So Inter had the preponderance of chances, and they neutralized City completely in a way that, they basically showed everyone how to beat City, how you neutralize them. And, Erling Haaland was in Acerbi's back pocket for 90 minutes. So I think, but it's clear that Inter want to develop on that path and change how they play and go more towards that, what made them good towards the end of last season, and perfect that. And I think that's why they got rid of Brozovic. And I think that's why they're getting rid of all these older, experienced players. It's time to air out the windows and clear the air. And every club needs to do that. But you have to be careful so that so that you don't, so that the plants don't freeze, if I'm allowed to use that analogy to its natural conclusion. But yeah, no, it is, that's how they're looking at it. And I think whether or not it is an interesting, and I've been waiting for this for years now, for them to do this. I'm so happy that it's a changing of the guards, much needed.
And then we'll just wrap up. We'll take a look at, some of the goal scoring metrics and how they performed against last season. This last season, Lautaro Martinez led the team 21 Serie A goals. Do you see that happening again? Do you see a single player leading Inter in goals with a tally of maybe 16 or more? Or do you think it comes a little bit more spread out with a healthy Lukaku, with the addition of Thuram? Where do you see that falling?
I think that Thuram is playing in the Champions League mainly. I think they're going to alternate like that, and I think Lukaku is playing in the Serie A, because Lukaku the Serie A is a league where Romelu Lukaku can score 30 goals, no doubt. I don't think he will reach quite that tally, but I do think he will hit 15-20 in the Serie A. I think he'll probably be Inter's top goal scorer because he's also the penalty taker in the Serie A. And he should be the penalty taker. It's the only aspect of Romelu Lukaku's game that is still world class is his penalty taking. He doesn't miss. He buries them. He kills them. I think Lautaro Martinez will continue to take strides. I think we're talking about a player who will score. I think he'll reach 30, 32 goals overall across all competitions in the Serie A. I'm not yet decided on whether or not he'll be Inter's top goal scorer in the Serie A. We'll have to wait and see. Thuram, I think, will hit 15-20 as well overall across all competitions. And look, if you look at that, 30, 15, 25, that's 60, 70 goals. And if you bring in Fratesi and Barella, if they can hit 7 to 10 each, well, you're looking at 80, 90 goals and a few here and there. That's like the math adds up for as much you have to, in order for you to score the 100 goals, 110 goals spread across the season in order to win 3 domestic competitions and get to a quarterfinal of the Champions League.
Okay, and we'll conclude things with a look at the defensive side of the ball. Inter last season allowed 42 goals in 38 league matches. Do you see them doing better than that mark this season?
Well, they have to do better defensively than they did in the Serie A. They were awful. I mean, the number of goals they conceded was far too many. They did well defensively in the Champions League, 8 clean sheets for Onana, but they did not do well in the league. They were too open in the league, and I think they will try to play more tighter and be more tighter defensively in the league than they are in Europe, than they were last year. Sorry, in the league as well. They have to. You don't win the Serie A if you don't have a good defense. It's as simple as that. And I think Inzaghi understands that. I think he's learned his lesson the hard way, and I think this is why this is the season he wants to write history and win. His 3 titles with another 3 titles with Inter, which together with the 4 he's won brings it up to 7, and that would forever make him, that would make him one of Inter's most successful coaches ever. And he is. I mean, I really believe. In 2017 I penned a column in Calcio Mercato's English page that no longer exists, but it was called why Simone Inzaghi is the next Italian super coach after Max Allegri and Antonio Conte. I think this is the season. Well, last season we saw that he is the next Italian big coach, or he already is, after Ancelotti, the biggest Italian coach available, together with I think he's right on the level with Conte and Allegri in terms of stature and reputation. I think this is the season he surpasses at least 2 of them. Maybe not Ancelotti, but definitely the other 2. And I really believe that. I think this is the season he will definitely kill off any doubts that he is the current Italian super coach.
All right. Well, there you have it. The state of Inter Milan. Nima, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't you remind the listeners one last time where they can find you?
Well, if they want to follow me on Twitter, it's my personal handle is Nima at Nima Tav ROOD. If you want to listen to the Italian Football Podcast, it's available on Spotify, Google Podcast, iTunes, the Italian Football Podcast. Just look for that. Where every Monday we do a free show for everybody, whether we do a review show of the past week. And then for patrons, it's we have a Q&A pod, which is on Tuesdays. And then in the summer, we have a transfer deep dive on a club. That we've done Inter, Juve, Napoli. We're doing Milan, Roma, Lazio these coming weeks, Fiorentina, Torino. And during the season, we do a midweek review show, and everything you can get everything for $2.99 on patreon.com/TIFP. And if you want to follow Inter news in English, go to sempreinter.com.
All right, there you have it. Nima, thanks again for coming on the pod. Everyone, please go give him a follow on Twitter. If this is your first time listening to the Kicks and Picks podcast, please consider subscribing to us on your podcast platform of choice. That way you'll get all of our episodes as they drop each week. We should be back again next week with another State of the Club podcast featuring one of your favorite clubs in either Premier League or Serie A. Until then, everyone have a good week, and we'll see you next time.